Todd Monken set to interview with the Bears on Friday. There are a lot of major questions about guys like Cliff Kingsbury, who apparently isn't going to be interviewing, with his focus being the Commanders now, not interviewing for any head coaching jobs, I should say. For now, we will see if that changes depending on what happens with the Washington Commanders over the next few days. What's up, guys? Welcome into the Halas Beat YouTube show brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's Nick Whalen. You can follow us on Twitter at Usayd Koshul and at _Nick Whalen. Dude, what is going on? I mean, it seems like every single day in Bears world, there is something happening that is just leading to people mass overreacting without looking at the facts.
Yeah, I just feel like that's social media in general right now. I mean, like we found out more facts about that whole Packers fan, Eagles fan. Like, in the end, it looks like nobody looks good, but it just feels like we need to back away from like immediate takes on Bears coaching search, Raiders coaching search, any of the coaching searches, and just let the process play out. Because we've got more weeks of this, most likely, with all the candidates in the playoffs and when you can interview who.
I don't see. There was the time, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners here and the viewers too remember, where you could straight up just, if it was like January 17th, 18th, 19th, it was time for you to basically announce your head coach and have the press conference. Like, this interview process used to take 2 weeks tops, week and a half, I would say, with how fast these teams would move. And now it just seems like, because of the way that the league kind of changed the rules, they obviously did it to keep people hooked on to the news cycle. So the league played their hand real well there, and they've got literally everyone just wondering, hey, what is going to happen? Like, the Bears flew in Mike McCarthy the other day, had him at Halas Hall for an interview. He obviously got onto a private jet, landed at a small airport near Halas Hall, and then Todd Monken is coming up here over the next couple of days. There's still a lot of questions at some point next week if the Bears are actually going to bring in Ben Johnson for an interview. I mean, the whole thing right now is completely up in air, and no one knows what to expect.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. In a way, it's, you have that, and then you have people that have already decided like who's good and who's bad. And I mean, so many things change, and coaches can grow over time. Like take Brian Flores, for example. They're like, we don't want Brian Flores near Caleb Williams because look at what happened to Tua. Well, I mean, that was like 6 years ago. Like, I mean, I know personally as a coach, I've grown in 6 years. I'm sure you have as well. And, things can change. So I feel like the message I want people that would watch this is, let's have a little bit more of an open mind, because things can change over time. And including a game that I have. You said you don't know this, but I have a game for you. I have 4 coaches, and I'm gonna tell you their win-loss percentage. I think it's gonna help not give away things for the regular season, and then I have their playoffs. Okay. And then you tell me which person you would like to hire. Okay. So, and I don't know if you can guess who these people are or not. Okay. I'll start with the best win-loss percentage record. Okay. It is 0.670. Okay. So pretty good regular season win-loss percentage. And then, man, I didn't put this in the percentile, and I should have before the show. They're 3-5 in the playoffs. Okay. So, at least they're winning some, right? But they're losing more. The next percentage would be, or coach number 2 is 0.667 regular season win percentage. So very close, right? Pretty good. They don't have a win in the playoffs. And then we have 0.608 regular season win-loss percentage. Still pretty good. Not as good as the first 2. They are 500 in the playoffs. And the last one is 0.530 regular win-loss percentage. So just over 500. Still doing pretty good, right? And 8-4 in the playoffs. Okay. So that one was way more successful in the playoffs, but not as successful in the regular season. So of that, who would be your top candidate out of those 4?
Okay, this is tough because I believe that I mean, the third guy I know who it is, and that's
Right.
just based on what we've kind of been discussing over the last 48 hours. I would definitely say this, right? Give me the guy that I believe is 8-4. You said,
Yep.
and the reason being is because it's like, you hear it from teams, you hear it from coaches, you hear it from players all the time, where the real season begins once you're in the playoffs. And like to
Yes.
me, the way that I look at it is you can win the regular season, but you can get your teeth kicked in during the playoffs. Cough, cough, Green Bay Packers for the last however
Right.
many years under Matt LaFleur. And so that's kind of the way that I see it too, is it's like, if the Bears can consistently start winning the regular season, like, cool, we'll have more positive things to say and chat about on this show. But I would much rather that they have a more successful run in the playoffs, because more successful run in the playoffs means a better chance of continuing to advance in the postseason, which means a higher likelihood that you are a consistent championship contender.
Yeah.
Plus, I also want to make this quick side note, is it seems to me like the Chiefs are the model organization for, hey, we're going to stumble throughout parts of the regular season and then get red hot when the playoffs come around. Like the Chiefs, and you could even throw the Ravens in there to an extent. Sometimes Buffalo, but not necessarily. They're teams that start strong, struggle for a bit because of a couple injuries here and there, and then just go into the postseason red hot.
Yeah. And I think some of that could be based off of coaches and like what you show in the regular season versus stuff that you save, as well as injuries. I think play a factor in that too, like resting some guys and making sure they get healthy. So let's recap who those 4 coaches are. Okay, so you said you thought who the third guy was. Who is that?
Would it be Mike McCarthy?
The third one is Mike McCarthy. So Mike McCarthy regular season win percentage is .608. And 11-11 in the playoffs. I said 500, right? Trying to keep it sneaky. You got me there. The coach that was 8-4 in the playoffs, but .530 win percentage. Who do you think that is?
That is a good question. I have no idea, to be honest. I mean,
these are all active head coaches. So that'll be a hint for you.
Okay, active head coaches. Would that possibly be? I mean, it can't be Mike Tomlin, right?
Not Mike Tomlin. No.
Mike Vrabel by chance, but I don't think he's ever been in 12 playoff games, so
right.
It can't be him. I would say, is it Sean McVay by chance? I mean, or
that's a good guess. It is off of that tree. It's Kyle Shanahan.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
because people don't think this. Kyle Shanahan has 4 seasons of a winning record with the 49ers. I believe all double-digit wins. But then he has 4 seasons of 7 or less win seasons there. So it's split 4-4. But those seasons, it's been loss in the Super Bowl, loss in the Super Bowl, loss in the championship game to the Eagles when Purdy had the injury. And I'm trying to remember the other one. But they've had success, so that helps. Okay, the last 2. .667 win percentage and no wins in the playoffs. Any guesses?
So 67% of games won.
Mm-hmm. So pretty good.
And you said these guys are all active head coaches, right?
All active head coaches. Yep. So this person's been to the playoffs, winless. I'm not going to tell you how many games though to help.
Kevin O'Connell.
That's Kevin O'Connell. Yep. Okay. So because if I said 0-2 in the playoffs, you know exactly who it is. Let's get all right. Last one, .67. So a little bit better than O'Connell. 3-5 in the playoffs.
3-5 in the playoffs. Let's see. I'm gonna see. It can't be Mike Vrabel because he hasn't coached in 8 playoff games. So
I feel like he's up there because they made the championship game the 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably not 8. He's probably at like 5, I'd say.
So he's like sort of in the ballpark, right? Yeah. What was the win-loss record again, real quickly?
.670. So he has the best regular season win-loss percentage.
Yeah, .670.
I'll look up Vrabel as you're thinking here.
So I can tell you right now, I just looked it up. It is not Mike Vrabel. I know I'm cheating on this game just a bit. Is it a AFC or NFC head coach?
It's NFC. And looking, y'all, Vrabel was in 5 playoff games. I didn't know that. That was a good guess for me.
So is it? Could it be Sean McVay by chance?
It's not Sean McVay.
Okay, so it's not Sean McVay. It can't be anyone from the NFC South because those guys are all like first, second, third year head coaches. Nick Sirianni, but I don't think he's been in the 8 playoff games.
No, his win-loss percentage I've looked is much better.
Okay, yeah. Otherwise, he'd probably be canned in Buffalo. Can't be. Is it Matt LaFleur by chance?
It is Matt LaFleur.
Okay,
good guess.
Yeah.
So, kind of the point of the exercise is if you take away the names, we have all this connotation, right? Kyle Shanahan is the guru, and Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur are these elite play callers and all these things going on, and then you just look at things in terms of percentages, and Shanahan's regular season hasn't been great. Postseason, you talked about the runs, but the regular season hasn't been great and consistent. And again, I know there's injuries that play into this, y'all, but that happens for every team. And then you look at LaFleur and O'Connell and combine their 3-7 in the playoffs, which is not what you want. And then you have McCarthy, who I feel like most of Bears Twitter is dragging 500 in the playoffs and 0.608 regular season, which is pretty good. To go further, you say, I have and again, since it's a video, I can show you guys. I do things by hand because I'm old school. Look at this, a whole sheet of this, okay? Mainly because I'm curious. Like when I'm curious about something, I'm like, let's dig into this. So this will be the next guessing game. If you're down for that, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm definitely down. Let's play another guessing game.
All right. So I looked at Mike McCarthy's 18 seasons as head coach, by the way. I did not think it was that many. That's a lot. I looked at his offenses in terms of points scored ranked in the NFL and yardage. Because I'm like, how consistent is this? So over 18 years, again, 1 to 32, right? 1 being the best, like the best top scoring offense and yards offense. Let's just start with points. Where do you think he ranks in 18 years in terms of between 1 and 32, where his offenses have ranked on average?
So this is a really good question. And I think, factoring in the years that he had in Green Bay, and then despite the fact that it wasn't overly successful the way some people had thought in Dallas, they were still good in the regular season when Kellen Moore was the play caller, which he just got a request to interview with the Cowboys. Yep. But I do think it's going to be somewhere inside the top 12 or the top 15. And the reason I say top 12 to top 15 is because certain years in Green Bay, like his last few years, the offense was never really elite, but because he had such a good quarterback, it was a massive difference maker having Aaron Rodgers at that position. And so that's one of the big reasons that he was kind of able to go ahead and consistently engineer a good offense. So to me, like, you're kind of talking about in semi-inflated stats here. Let's call it how it is. Because on paper, it wasn't the best. On the field, it wasn't the best, but they made it look really good in a way that is kind of deceiving.
Yeah, no, I totally get that one. So, and I have it by a percentile, so we'll get close here. In points, they ranked 8.6. So if you want to round up, you could say 9. And to dive into this, there were only 4 seasons out of 18 where he ranked out of the top 15. And this last year, and a lot of them were injury related, he had Dak for 8 games. His first year in Dallas, he had Dak for 5 games. Second to last year in Green Bay, he had Rodgers for 7 games. And then his first year as a head coach, he ranked 22nd. So 8.6 was actually better than I thought. I mean, I knew the offenses in Green Bay were good, and I knew Dallas, they had a couple of really good years, but that's pretty consistent. And then actually, if I looked at just the Dallas years, he was there for 5 years, they were 8.8 ranked for offensive points scored, which is pretty good. All right. Do you want to give a guess for yards?
Has to be in the top 15 in yards as well, I'm going to guess, because there were years where like 2011, 12, 13, 14, you could just see the Packers were kind of at the top of the world with McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. Yep.
I mean, there were his first 6 years in Green Bay, they were top 9 every year, which is crazy in yards. So overall, over the 18 years, it was 8.9 rankings. You could say ninth if you want to round up. And then just Dallas specifically was 9.6, which again, top 10 in both is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that's really a factor. I was talking to someone today, and one of the points of conversation that came up was, and this person is a Packers fan, by the way, but one of the points of conversation that came up was certain people feel like Mike McCarthy is not a 21st century offensive mind. But then that, I think, to me sort of brings up the question of like, what exactly is defined as a 21st century offensive mind in football? Because if you look at all these guys that the Bears are bringing in, the key thing to understand is that they're bringing in guys that are young in the coaching profession. I don't think if you're watching this, right, the big thing to really understand is that whatever level you're at, like you could be coaching for at the high school, college, or pro level for 10, 11, 12 years. And in other professions, that's considered to be like experienced. And then in the coaching world, 10, 11, 12 years is kind of just like, oh, you're still some way, somehow getting your feet wet, because there's gonna always be someone on staff that has like 3 to 4 times the experience that you do. And so the interesting thing to me is you have this Bears organization interviewing two completely ends of the spectrum. They're looking at, some of the younger, trendier offensive minds in the game, the guys like the Ben Johnsons and Drew Petzings of the world. But then you're also looking at some of the older guys who have really cut their teeth in, like a Mike McCarthy, like a Brian Flores, like a Todd Monken. And so when you start looking at, I think, the win-loss records, well, that really plays a part into what really is considered a good offensive mind today in football.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I looked at that too because I was curious, because I've heard people are like, well, if they hire Mike McCarthy, it's like hiring John Fox. And I'm like, okay, like John Fox was successful in Denver because they signed Peyton Manning. Like that's what happened there. So I was looking at this, and McCarthy's 61, and our last episode, I made the remark of Tom Monken gives me the Bruce Arians vibes. So Monken's 58, and Bruce Arians, when he was hired at Arizona, was 61. And so this is the same age as McCarthy, a little bit older than Monken, and John Fox with Chicago was 60. So I guess my first question to you is do you have an issue with a coach that's 58 to 61 getting hired for this job?
Not really. And again, the reason being is because if you are, up there in your late 50s, early 60s, like the organization probably doesn't know how much longer you're going to coach, right? But you're guaranteed at least, let's just say 3 years at this point. So you're coaching to you're about 61 to, 64, 65 years old. The big thing to, I think, keep in mind is this. The reason I don't have an issue is because you're basically operating on the 3-year window that is Caleb Williams' rookie contract.
Yes.
So if you succeed, well, then you're probably going to have someone here as a successor that is already with you on staff that is one of those younger coaches. Because a lot of times, what good organizations will do, and I know the Patriots did this, but then fired Gerard Mayo for Mike Vrabel, but what good organizations will do is kind of follow the Bruce Arians model, where it's, hey, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be coaching, then I'm going to go ahead and bring in a guy like Todd Bowles as DC, and then when I decide to retire and leave, everything's going to, be handed over to Todd Bowles. And the reason being is because we just want to ensure a seamless transition. I mean, that strategy, I don't think people realize, like, in the long run, saves organizations a lot of time, effort, money, and energy that, quite frankly, is hard to come by when you're working in this profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I've heard people remark for Tampa Bay that they're hoping they just give Liam Cohen the job because he's been there. They don't want to lose him because they think that that's going to be more successful over time. But I agree with you. And that's, again, kind of the purpose of having assistant head coaches, as well as coordinators, is that they know the system, the players know them. There's not going to be, because the people, at this point are kind of down on Mike Tomlin, but there's something to consistency because you're not changing your scheme every few years. You're not changing GMs who brought guys in. Now they want to get these guys out. By the time they get everything together, it's a couple years in. And that's one thing with the Raiders, y'all, is they've had so many GMs and head coaches over the last even 5 years that there's no way there could be inconsistency with personnel and scheme and things like aligning and fitting right. So no, I'm with you there. One thing I found interesting, I wrote down all of the main guys that we're talking about here for the head coaching job, their ages. I was surprised with one. The next oldest guy besides that group. Oh, how about this? Do you want to guess, or are you done with the guessing game?
I mean, yeah, I will go ahead and guess.
Well, I didn't look up. Hold on. To be fair, I didn't look up. David Shaw. I didn't look him up because I don't think he's a real candidate. And I didn't look up Ron Rivera or Vance Joseph. So those are all off the board. Who is the next oldest guy of like the legit candidates?
I think it could be an Arthur Smith or a Brian Flores. Like,
so Arthur
Smith, of those two.
He's 42. Arthur Smith, younger than I thought, actually. Flores is 43. The next oldest guy is 52, and it's Aaron Glenn.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't think he was that old. Now, again, I remember him playing with the Jets back in the day and in the league, but, because people are like, well, Tom Monken's maybe too old. Well, Aaron Glenn's 6 years younger. Like, he's not like he's a super young guy either. So I just found that one kind of fascinating through the research. I didn't expect Glenn to be that old.
Yeah, and one of the things to kind of keep in mind here as we're evaluating the analytics behind this whole thing is that, and really the Bears coaching search in general, it seems like people are gravitating more toward a lot of the younger candidates simply because they are under the impression that, well, as a younger candidate, you're going to understand the modern game more and the dynamics of the league more, when in reality, it's like, hey, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when the passing revolution was in full scale and defenses were basically playing single high safety, what happened is, to slow that down, defensive coordinators started going with 2 high shells all over the place, which then kind of led to the running back position being so valuable all over again, whereas just a couple of years ago it was devalued. But to your point about some of these defensive minded guys like a Aaron Glenn, for example, because again, until the Bears make a head coaching hire, all these candidates that they're bringing in should to some extent in different capacities be considered as legitimate sort of options to be the candidate. Like, Aaron Glenn runs one of the better 2 high shells that I've seen throughout the NFL over the last couple of years, merely in terms of scheme and how everything blends together, because you've got 2 really good safeties in Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. And the reason that it's so effective is because both of those guys can alternate between playing free safety as well as playing strong safety. And I mean, you and I know better than anything, when you have a really good safety tandem back there running those 2 high shells, you're able to basically rush with 4 because your back end, your back 4, your corners, and your safeties are going to take care of everything else.
Well, and you don't know how they're going to rotate. Like with the Bears, you're like, well, Jaquan Brisker's not very good as your deep safety, so you're assuming he's going to come down and run support. When you have pieces like that, to me, it's football is a lot about predicting what's going to happen. I mean, when Mercedes Lewis is on the field, it's a run play. Well, that's a tell. That's what you don't want to have happen. You want a guy that you're like, well, I'm not sure if this is run or pass. That's what helps with play action. That's what helps with flow. That's what helps with everything. So no, I'm with you there. It's interesting you pointed out the perception of the Mike Kafka's and the Drew Pensings, were they're both 37, by the way. Adam Stenovich is 41. Ben Johnson's 38. Joe Brady 35. The younger coaches are the ones that are going to work, and that's because people are chasing Sean McVay, right? Kevin O'Connell, Matt LaFleur. They think like, well, okay, the young ones that call plays, that's what works. Somewhat, yeah. But other ways have worked too. Like, for instance, Tom Monken. So Tom Monken, of knowing the new age, I broke down his offenses. I won't quiz you on this one, but so he was OC in Tampa for 3 years, 16, 17, 18, then in Cleveland, 19. And he was 18th, 12th, 22nd in scoring. 18th, 9th, 3rd, 22nd in yards gained. So fairly middle of the road the whole time. Then went to Georgia, and I wanted to gauge it because Georgia's been a powerhouse. They're so good. But I was like, what was it like before Todd Monken was there? So they were the year before Todd, they were 49th in scoring and 59th in yards. His first year was 38 and 41, but then his last 2 years when they won the championships, they were 9th and 5th in points scored and 5th in yards gained, which was awesome. So then, that's younger, than NFL players. Those younger kids he has to interact with, get them to learn, know things, and then comes to Baltimore. And these last 2 years, y'all, I mean, one of the best offenses in the NFL. They've been 4th and 3rd in points scored and 6th and 1st in yards gained. So, again, I like when there's multiple data points. And Monken, I mean, again, even with Tampa and Cleveland those prior years, they weren't loaded with talent. They didn't have great quarterback play. So considering he's been successful in all these places, I'd be more than happy with Tom Monken as the Bears head coach.
Yeah, and just on the concept of scheme here very quickly, the more that I watch the Ravens offense, I can confidently say that Todd Monken continues to grow on me. Like, the way that I look at this whole thing is that the Ravens are one of the simplest, but one of the fanciest offenses in the league, because these guys are running just like a variation of, both inside and outside zone. There's also a hell of a lot of, gap scheme principles in the offense. And then the big thing to keep in mind is that you look at the teacher that Monken is, and it just seems like every single time you watch the Ravens play, there is nothing but 11 guys playing as one unit. Like, coaches a lot of times have this sort of saying, which is like 11 as one, which is you're all 11 different guys, but you're playing as one unit. That to me is like for that saying, Todd Monken to me is the standard, because yes, he's going to run a slightly different offense here because Caleb Williams is not a Lamar Jackson and Lamar Jackson's is not a Caleb Williams. They're two quarterbacks that are on the opposite end of the quarterback spectrum. However, if he can figure out a way, Monken can put guys like Roshan Johnson and Roshan Johnson and DeAndre Swift in positions to succeed. The sky's really the limit for what this Bears offense can do. And I will say, I tweeted this during the Ravens playoff win against the Steelers. Monken's obviously putting on an absolute clinic, and he should be in serious consideration for the job. And people are like, well, the Bears don't have, a Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson. Well, not a big deal, because if you are a good head coach, you are not just going to try to do what the Matt Nagy's of the world did and have the same playbook, right? You're going to adapt it to whatever your scheme is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, and then in Georgia, he had a walk-on quarterback, Stetson Bennett, and Brock Bowers. So the whole offense went through the tight end and Ladd McConkey. So, like, to me, it is ever kind of evolving. The one thing that's interesting too is how good the Ravens have been this year. I did not think their offense was going to be as good. Not because I don't believe in Lamar Jackson. He's unbelievable. Or Derrick Henry. Their offensive line, y'all, I'm pretty sure they lost 3 starters. Morgan Moses, I know, went to the Jets, and they lost either 1 or 2 interior guys. And I was like, man, I don't know if that old line is going to be good enough to sustain and give Lamar time and give them holes. And again, as you're talking about 11 on 11, 11 as 1, making it work with new pieces on the O-line, not just Derrick Henry. So you have a guy that, again, communicates well with his position coaches, communicates well with the players, because if you're successful multiple years in the NFL, multiple years in college, winning titles, going to the playoffs, being in these important games, you probably have a lot of your stuff and your communication together.
Yes, you absolutely do. So we've got about 1 to 2 minutes left on this thing. I need to go ahead and ask you, because I feel like these sort of like, last 1 minute segments, as soon as I come up with a creative name for them, I will certainly start using that. But all right, in a minute or less, man, tell me, how much should prior experience be factored into some of these head coaching jobs, in your opinion? Like a guy like Mike McCarthy, super experienced in that head coaching chair, which is such a unique position. A guy like Ben Johnson, never really been in the head coaching job at any level, but how much are you factoring in that past experience?
I'm factoring in a lot, honestly, because we talked about this a little bit on our last show, but because the offensive coordinator hat or defensive coordinator hat is different than head coaching, because you're dealing with so much more. So I like that Tom Monken was a head coach, at least in college. So he's dealt with some of it, or Brian Flores or Mike McCarthy, and I think that's part of the reason why they've brought in some people that have been head coaches before, because they've run an organization, and some that haven't, because you're going to get ideas from both. But to me, I think it is important. I'm not saying that Ben Johnson can't be successful, but we've seen a lot of people that have been, well, they're just a really good coordinator, down the list. You can go through Josh McDaniels a couple of times. He was the hot coordinator name multiple times, Brian Dable, etc., where it hasn't worked out. So to me, like any job, would you rather have someone that hasn't done it before or someone that has at least some experience? Whether they've been great or not, they at least have some experience. I'd rather have some experience.
And that is a really good point here, because I'm going to add this in very quickly. Like, rolling of the dice when you're hiring a head coach is one of the biggest risks to take. Sometimes the dice fall in your favor, such as Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Sometimes it just blows up in your face, like we've seen the Bears do 5 or 6 times dating back to 2010, 2011. But I mean, it's a massive risk, whoever you're taking, because all the successful franchises, there's this perception that the good teams are just good coaches and good players and a franchise quarterback, when in reality, all the successful franchises, from the ownership down to the quality control coach to the athletic training staff, everyone's on the same page about literally everything on the football side of things. And the Bears, unfortunately, have kind of not been there. So if you get someone in here that, aligns philosophically with Poles, which I do think Mike McCarthy aligns with Brian Poles in terms of that draft and develop type of mentality, that there's a legit chance that maybe things get turned around.
Yeah, no, that's a good point of the Poles part of it too, because I hope, man, that Brian Poles isn't like, hey, I have a short time window here and I have to get someone that's going to win right away, versus still thinking long term. So that is one fear that I have. But I mean, right now I think Ben Johnson's going to be a good coach, Tom Monken and Mike McCarthy, and those are my top 3 for multiple different reasons, but because I've seen data points multiple times, and that always gives me a little bit more of a safety net with the Bears head coaching search.
It does. And as much as we have enjoyed this, we want to continue this conversation. We hope to be top 3 in your Bears YouTube show to watch, maybe even the top 1, the one and only. Make sure you guys are following us on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, at _Nick Whalen. Check out the Bear Report on Twitter as well. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the Bear Report YouTube channel. Listen, Nick and I sort of agree that despite being football coaches, we are going to carve out at least 30 minutes twice a week to kind of do this thing, because talking football is really all we know. And so you're going to be hearing from us pretty regularly. Am I right?
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Pretty regularly. That's going to do it from us. Like I said, like, follow, comment, and subscribe. We will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend. And as always, bear down.